All right, we're going to introduce physiology to you, and also we're going to hopefully start to review biological chemistry. And I do call it a review because the chemistry that I'm going to cover you would have learned in any college biology course, any. And if you haven't had college bio, we've recommended that you've had micro. We've recommended you take everything before you take this class. That's what I really recommend. All right, first let's begin with really simple stuff. Anatomy and physio. Aren't they the same thing? A lot of students commonly think that. They say, okay, I know what anatomy is. I guess physio is just more of the same. Physio is totally different. Anatomy, as we wrote, is the scientific study of what the body looks like. Its structure, its morphology, its shape. So you learned about not only what the different parts of your body look like, but what they're called. Right? So you learn about the names and parts of parts and names of the bones, and the parts and the names of the muscles, and the parts and the names of the blood vessels, and all that. It's a lot of memorizing. To be honest with you, and I actually tell my students when I teach anatomy this, I hated anatomy. As a student, I hated anatomy because I hate memorizing. I don't like memorizing. I'm not good at memorizing. It takes me a lot of work. But all my degrees are in physiology. I loved physiology. So what's physiology? Physiology is a study of how the body works, how it functions. Now, the way we describe how something works is in terms of chemistry and physics. So really, physiology is biochemistry and biophysics. In fact, for people who are physiology majors, like I was, I had to take all these upper division courses in biochemistry and biophysics. So you really have to know that stuff. And that I really enjoyed. I'm not saying you need to enjoy it, but I really enjoy it because it's not really memorizing things, it's understanding how it works. And that kind of interested me in understanding mechanisms of how things actually work. Let me give you an analogy that I commonly give in my anatomy class as well. If I was talking about a car engine, if we were talking about the anatomy of a car engine, I would be pointing to the different parts of the car engine and telling you what the different parts are called. I'd say, see that? That's called the radiator. See this? This is the fan belt. Over here, that's the battery. You say, I knew that one already. Okay, I'd say, see this? That's called the engine block. Let's open up the engine block. You see these chambers, these cavities or chambers in the engine, inside the engine? Those are called cylinders. And you see these things that are in the cylinders? They're called pistons. And there's these things called valves. That would be the anatomy of the car engine. We're learning what the different parts look like and what they're called. What would the physiology of a car engine be? Explain internal combustion. Internal combustion is a chemical reaction that occurs in those cylinders of the car engine where gasoline is ignited with air, creating an explosion that causes these pistons to move up and down. That's starting to talk about the physiology of the car engine, how the engine works. Or we might ask, how does the electronic ignition system work in the car? That's the physiology. That's how it works. It's not just the naming the parts, but it's understanding the chemical reactions, the electrical signals, the whole way that whole engine is working. And in terms of physiology, all these parts need to work together. If I remove one piston out of that entire car engine, the whole engine won't work. If you pull the heart out of your body, you're dead. Right? Pull the kidneys out, you're gone. Cut one blood vessel, it's over. It's all integrated together, just like that car engine. You cut one wire, the whole engine won't work. So physiology is understanding how all these different parts are working together to keep you going, just like a car engine. Now, we commonly divide physiology into two parts, cellular physiology and organ system physiology. Cellular physiology is how the cells work. Organ system physiology is how the organ systems work. It's called systemic physiology. Now, cellular physiology, you should already know. You'd say, wait a second, what do you mean I should already know cellular physiology? I'm taking physiology now. The prerequisite for this course is biology and or microbiology. In your biology class, and I'm going to assume most of you have had college biology, because that's really what you should take, or at least micro, or both. Did you learn about cellular respiration? Yeah. Cellular respiration is a biochemical process occurring in cells by which they generate energy to stay alive. So you learned about that. That's cellular physiology. That's how a cell functions, how it works, how it makes energy. Did you learn in your biology class about active transport? About how certain chemicals are transported in or out of the cell? That's how the cell works. Did you learn in your biology class, your microbiology class, anything about protein synthesis? How proteins are manufactured within a cell by joining amino acids together? That's how the cell works. Did you learn in biology, in microbiology, even in anatomy, did you learn about cell division, mitosis? That's how cells divide. All of that is cell physiology, how cells work. Now, we're going to be reviewing that quickly, but we assume you already have learned it, because our focus is on organ system physiology. Now, I wrote that organ system physiology is understanding the regulation, the control of all kinds of physiological processes within the body by homeostatic reflexes. If there is a single word in this entire course that you're going to understand better than any word, it's the word homeostasis. That is the essence of a physiology course. The word homeostasis, we're going to spend an entire class meeting on this, literally means constant state. You'd say, what do you mean homeostasis, constant state? You know, it's interesting. Yesterday, the day before, were very hot days. And it didn't matter how hot it was. You could be standing in that hot sun. If we would have taken your body temperature, your body temperature should have been 98.6, 99 degrees. 37 degrees centigrade, even on a hot day. On a cold night, if we take your temperature, it still should be 98.6, 99 degrees. It doesn't matter whether it's hot or cold out, because your body temperature, if everything's working correctly, is kept constant. Your blood sugar level is kept more or less constant. It doesn't matter if you eat a candy bar right now, high in sugar, or it doesn't matter if you haven't had anything to eat in 6 hours. Your blood sugar level should be constant. If it's not, if your body isn't being controlled and regulated properly, you're sick. Something's wrong. If your body temperature isn't 98.6, if it's either higher than normal or lower than normal, you're ill. There's a pathology. Something is wrong. If your blood sugar level isn't right, something's wrong. Right? So that's the whole essence of what this course is about, is how does your body control and regulate all these things within you that keep everything constant and working. Now, in this class, we are going to talk about a little bit on pathophysiology. That's a big subject you'll hear much more about in your clinical programs. What does patho mean? Patho. Disease. Patho means disease. It's the physiology of diseases. And that's what you're going to be learning. You know, in your prerequisite courses, you learn what's normal. And in your clinical courses, you learn all the things that go wrong. Right? Because that's where you're going to be. You know, people go to the doctor, they go to the dentist, they go to the hospital because something's not right. So it's abnormal. It's basically the study of abnormal, rather than normal, biochemical and biophysical processes within that occur in disease. What are some examples of that? Well, for example, if we measured your blood sugar level, a normal blood sugar level is 100 milligrams of glucose per 100 milliliters of blood. You can write it down. You are going to memorize it. By the time you finish this course, you're going to know what a normal blood sugar level is, a normal cholesterol level, normal pH, normal oxygen levels, normal carbon dioxide levels, all kinds of stuff. Because that's basically the kind of information you need when you're dealing with patients. So basically, when you go to a doctor and they draw blood, one of the things they routinely measure is your blood sugar level, your glucose level, and they want to see that it's 100 milligrams per glucose per 100 milliliters of blood. If it's much, much higher than that, what do you have? Diabetes. Right? So if they say, don't eat any food for 6, 12 hours, and they check your blood sugar level and it's way high, and you haven't eaten anything, something's wrong. That's not right. So we're going to learn, so examples of pathophysiology is an abnormal blood sugar level, that's called diabetes, abnormal blood pH. Normal pH of the blood is 7.4. If the pH is lower than 7.4, if the pH is lower, is that acidosis or alkalosis? Acidosis. Acidosis. You should have learned in your biology and or chemistry course, and hopefully you've had both, the pH scale. I can't teach you, introductory biology and chemistry. I don't have time. We've got too much physiology to learn. So the lower the pH number, the more acidic. The higher the pH number, the more alkaline. So we're going to learn all different causes of acidosis and alkalosis. We're going to learn about ketoacidosis, respiratory acidosis, metabolic alkalosis. All these things that can go wrong where our pH is out of whack. These are obviously physiology and pathophysiology involves measuring chemical levels. But I said that physiology and pathophysiology are not only biochemistry, physiological chemistry, it's also biophysics. If we measure your ECG, you'd say, what's that? That's your electrocardiogram. We're going to be learning about electrocardiograms, the electrical currents that move through your heart. Has anybody ever had an electrocardiogram taken? All right, so they look at these waves. If they don't look right, you have an electrical arrhythmia of your heart. The electrical current is not flowing through your heart properly, and therefore your heart's not working properly. So an abnormal electrocardiogram indicates a pathology of the heart. So that's really what the essence of physiology and medicine are. They measure all these chemical levels, they measured various electrical currents in the body and so on, and they measure all these different things to see if everything's working right. If it's not working right, the goal is to fix it, to repair it, to make it better. So we're going to learn a little bit also about pharmacology. What's pharmacology? That's the study of drugs. Why do you take drugs? I mean, you could take it to get high, but why do you take drugs? A patient takes drugs to make something that's not right better. So the idea of a drug is to return the abnormal condition back to the normal condition. So for example, if we measured somebody's blood sugar level and it's much, much higher than normal, so they have diabetes, they're either going to be told to inject themselves with insulin or take a pill orally, such as metformin, glucophage. Has anybody ever heard of glucophage? And they will take it, and what does it do? It lowers their blood sugar level. The role of drugs is to return the abnormal state of their body back towards the normal state. If somebody's got an abnormal pH, you want to do something to them, give them something that returns the pH back to normal. If their electrocardiogram is abnormal, you may put them on medication to make their electrical activity more normal than it is. That's the whole idea. Something's not right, they're going to be placed on medication or have some procedure done to make them more normal than they've been. Somebody's got a high cholesterol level, what are they going to take? Lipitor or some other drug. What does Lipitor do? It lowers their cholesterol level to make them more normal. That's the whole essence of medicine. And that's why this course in physiology is the most important course that most of you will take before you enter the clinical program. Because this is really the essence of how your body works, what can go wrong, and an introduction to how you treat it, how you make it right. That's really what medicine is all about. Okay, well, we're going to learn a lot more about that. As far as the levels of organization of the human body, you learned in biology, in anatomy, that the human body can be subdivided into organ systems. So in anatomy, you remember you learned the skeletal system, and the muscular system, the digestive system, and the respiratory system, the urinary system, the circulatory system, the lymphatic system, the endocrine system, the reproductive system, the nervous system, and the integument, or skin. I think I got them all. Now you might say,
Can you say that slower so I can write it down? Okay, you're going to be getting this book, all right? And let's just see what it does. I'm going to look right at the very beginning of this book, all right? And this is, let me get to chapter 1 here. All right. Okay, good. All right, here's chapter 1. All right, here it is. So I'm going to turn to the first page, and what does it talk about? Anatomy and physiology define, levels of structural organization, what we were talking about, and then what does it cover next? What it covers next is it starts showing you all the systems of the body and what organs are make up which systems. And you can see, here it is. This is page 6 and 7 right here. Cardiovascular system, urinary system. So you're responsible. You've all had anatomy. You should know which organs make up which systems of the body. After it covers the systems, ooh, you know what it covers on page 8? There's the word. Right on page 8, in the first chapter, all right, in the first chapter, and it starts to talk about homeostatic reflexes. This is absolutely essential information. It appears in the very first chapter, and that's why you want to read about it. Obviously, I'm going to lecture on all this junk, but this helps reinforce the concepts. Anyhow, those are systems, so you can review the systems right in page 6, right at the beginning. On the next page in the lecture outline, so in fact, just like the book shows in color, just as the book shows in color, so here it shows a person. We're made up of systems. This happens to show the digestive system. Each system is made up of organs. The stomach is one of the many organs that comprise the digestive system. The organs are made up of tissues. You learn that in anatomy. Remember epithelial tissues, connective tissues, nerve tissues, and muscle tissues. The tissues are made up of cells. The cells are made up of macromolecules. The macromolecules are made up of smaller molecules, which are made up of atoms, which in turn are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. That's called the hierarchy of life. And that's right in the first chapter of the book. It shows the same stuff. All right? Now, on the next page, page A3, I am going to actually enumerate the systems. I'm going to mention these organ systems of the body. You've heard the organ systems before. You learned them in anatomy. The unique thing that I'm going to mention now is the way I'm going to group them. I'm going to group these systems into a few groupings. The first group is I'm going to list all those systems of the body that are involved in maintaining the internal environment within the body, and they are all connected or related to the bloodstream. So which systems of the body maintain our internal environment and relate to the bloodstream? The first, obviously, is the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system, which is your heart and blood vessels, it pushes, it distributes, it conducts oxygen and carbon dioxide, nutrients and waste products, hormones, white blood cells and antibodies, and heat to and from the different parts of the body. That's what the job of your cardiovascular system. It carries the nutrients here, it carries the waste products there, it distributes hormones everywhere, it distributes white blood cells and antibodies throughout your body. Does it relate to the bloodstream? Of course, it's pushing blood. Another system that maintains the internal environment of your body and also relates to the bloodstream is your respiratory system. What's your respiratory system? Okay, what's your lungs? The job of your respiratory system essentially is to take the oxygen that's out here and move it into your bloodstream. Where does the oxygen that's here in the air actually enter the bloodstream? Across the air sacs or alveoli. When that oxygen gets down to those little tiny microscopic air sacs, it then diffuses into the bloodstream. At the same time that the oxygen goes into the bloodstream, carbon dioxide diffuses out of the bloodstream, and then it's blown out, exhaled out into the air. So the job of your respiratory system is to deliver oxygen into the bloodstream and remove carbon dioxide out of the bloodstream. In so doing, it maintains the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in our bloodstream. So it's relating to the blood, and it's maintaining the internal environment of our body. Another system that maintains the internal environment of the body and relates to the bloodstream is your gastrointestinal system, also known as your GI system, gastrointestinal, also known as the digestive system. Now, the gastrointestinal system really carries on a two-step process. Two steps. First, you digest the food into nutrients. And then, secondly, you absorb those nutrients into the bloodstream. So it relates to the bloodstream. Where is most of the food digested? In the small intestine. In the very first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. Not in the stomach. The stomach is really mostly a holding chamber. Most digestion occurs in the first segment of the small intestine called the duodenum. Now, what is digestion? Digestion involves breaking apart the big organic molecules, the macromolecules in our food, into nutrients. There are four major types of macromolecules, or organic molecules, that make up our food. And you've heard these terms: carbs, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. That's what makes up your food. It doesn't matter whether you're eating chicken or pizza, whether you're having a salad, or you're having falafels in a pita. All right? All food is mostly made up of these four major types of organic compounds: carbs, lipids or fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. Now, the first comment you might have is, wait a second, there's nucleic acids in my food? There's nucleic acids in chicken? There's nucleic acids in pizza? Come on, really? Yes. And here's why. Everything that you eat, with only two exceptions, came from a living thing. Everything that you eat, with only two exceptions, comes from a living thing. You'd say, really? Let's think about it. If you eat meat, did that come from a living thing? Obviously. Fish, did that come from a living thing? Eggs? Milk? Right? Water. Cheese? Huh? Water. All right, we're getting to that. Okay, now, how about tomatoes? Is that from a living thing? All right. Now, how about squash? Is that from a living thing? It's a plant. All right. How about you eat mushrooms? It's a fungus. That's what a mushroom is. It's a fungus, a living thing. All right. The only two exceptions are water and salt. Water and salt. Everything else that you eat, you'd say pepper comes from a peppercorn plant, peppercorn tree. Cinnamon comes from the bark of a cinnamon tree. How about garlic? You ever seen garlic cloves? From a plant. All right. Onions, is that from a plant? Everything that you eat came from a living thing. You'd say, okay, fine. So the only exceptions are water and salt. So what? You learned in biology, all living things are made of cells. So if you're eating chicken, you know what you're actually eating when you're eating meat? Muscle cells. That's what you're eating. Meat is muscle tissue. Is there new DNA in muscle tissue? Well, you've all had anatomy. You learned that skeletal muscle cells are very unique. They are multinucleated. And what's the major chemicals in a nucleus? DNA and RNA. Remember, you learned about 3 types of muscle tissue in anatomy. You'd say, you mean I'm supposed to remember all this? Yes. And whatever you learn in physiology, you need to remember for your future pathophysiology and pharmacology courses. Okay? These build. It's just like when you take Spanish 1, you have to remember Spanish 1 to do well in Spanish 2. And before you can move on to Spanish 3, you got to remember Spanish 2. Right? Isn't that true? If you have to keep going backwards, you're never going to move forward. So you have to build on the knowledge. So eating meat is, in fact, very high in DNA. Now, when you're eating lettuce, what are you actually eating? You're eating the leaves of a plant, and they're made up of cells. And all cells have a nucleus that contains DNA and RNA. Now, certainly some foods are high in carbs, some other foods are high in fats, other foods are high in proteins, and some foods, including meat, are high in nucleic acids. Another food that's high in nucleic acid are seeds. You'd say seeds. I don't eat seeds. You like lima beans, peas, corn, rice, wheat? You know what all those are? Seeds. And would there be DNA in a seed? Of course. It's a little baby plant. And it needs the genetic code to grow. Incidentally, this is why we want students to take biology, because we're not only in understanding humans, we need to understand what we eat. And we eat plants as well as animals. And we need to understand what's in a plant, chemically. And plants are different from animals. But anyhow, so these are the four major types of organic compounds that make up all our food, and they also make up us. Because these are the four major types of chemicals that make up all living things. And everything we eat, with the exception of water and salt, came from a living thing. You'd say, but I only eat pizza. That's not from a living thing. Well, the pizza dough came from wheat, right? The cheese came from a cow, from an animal. The mushrooms are a fungus. If you put onions and olives and bell pepper on the pizza, all those are parts of a plant. The whole thing is just from living things. All right, so what is digestion? Digestion is breaking apart these macromolecules into simple nutrients. Carbs are broken apart into simple sugars called monosaccharides. Mono means simple or single. Saccharide means sugar, simple sugars. Lipids are broken apart into fatty acids. Proteins are broken apart into amino acids. Nucleic acids like DNA and RNA are broken apart into nucleotides. And then these nutrients are absorbed into our body, mostly into our bloodstream, and most absorption occurs across the jejunum and ileum of the small intestine. That's where these nutrients are absorbed into our bloodstream. And then, once these nutrients enter our bloodstream, they are made available to the cells of our body. Our cells, our human cells, then take these simple nutrients, which came from our food, and reassemble them into human chemicals. Human chemicals. This explains why you are not what you eat. In other words, if you eat chicken all the time, why don't you become a chicken? If you're a vegetarian, why don't you turn into a plant? Because you don't become what you eat. Why not? Because you don't absorb what you ate. You ate chicken proteins. You eat proteins that are in beans that make up a plant. You break them apart into amino acids, and you reassemble the cells of your body, use those simple nutrients, and rejoin them together into human proteins, human chemicals. So it doesn't matter what you eat. Does changing what you eat cause a change in your eye color? Does it change your blood type? Does it change whether you have freckles or dimples? Right? It doesn't. Because you don't absorb what you eat. You digest what you ate into simple nutrients, absorb them into your body, and reassemble them into human chemicals. Now, how do the cells of your body know how to assemble these nutrients into human chemicals? Your DNA. Your DNA, or genetic code, is the code by which it uses these nutrients to join them into human chemicals. All right? So that's just basic information that a lot of people misunderstand. All right, so that's the gastrointestinal system. So as the GI system absorbs these nutrients, it ensures adequate nutrients for the cells of the body. So is it helping to maintain the internal environment of your body? And does it relate to the bloodstream? Yes, it does. Another system of the body that maintains the internal environment and relates to the bloodstream is the renal or urinary or excretory system. They all mean the same thing. The function of your kidneys, your urinary system, is to filter out and remove metabolic waste. What's the word metabolic mean? Anybody know? You ever seen the word metabolic, metabolism?
Yeah.
It must mean something, right? Or is it just a filler? It's just a filler. It doesn't mean anything. It means biochemical. All right? Metabolic or metabolism means biochemical. If you say, you know, I think I've got a slow metabolism, you're saying that the rate of the biochemical reactions in your body are slow. If you say, I've got a fast metabolism, then the biochemical reactions in your body are fast. If you have a metabolic disorder, you have a biochemical disorder. Words mean something. It's not just a filler. It's not just sitting there and we can just ignore it. It means something. All right, so the urinary system, the kidneys remove these biochemical, these metabolic wastes and excess water and excess salts, and we excrete them out in our urine. That's why it's also called the excretory system. We excrete urine. So is the urinary system maintaining the internal environment, making sure that we don't have a buildup of waste and too much water and salts? And is it relating to the bloodstream? Yes, because it's removing them from the bloodstream. Now, before we go any further, let's go back to the previous page, the bottom picture on the previous page, A2. This is the way physiologists view the body. Gee, this doesn't look like the way anatomists view the body. In anatomy, you had all these beautiful pictures in color of the organs, the heart, the kidneys. This is physiology. You'd say, what are we looking at? Okay, let's see. Here's the cells of your body. There they are. You're made up of about 60 trillion cells. This is the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system is the heart and blood vessels. Cardiovascular. The job of the heart is to push the blood through the vessels. Now, here's the digestive system. There it is. It's the alimentary canal. This is the mouth end. This is the anus end. The food goes in here. The food, the carbs, the proteins, the nucleic acids, the fats are digested into nutrients, and the monosaccharides, the amino acids, the nucleotides are absorbed into the bloodstream. That's the arrow. It's being absorbed into the bloodstream. What's interesting on this diagram is there's an arrow going in the opposite direction. That means that what's in the bloodstream can go also back out into the alimentary canal. We're going to learn a lot more about that. An example of when what's in your bloodstream starts to go out into the alimentary canal is, let's imagine one has a little infant, and their person's infant is sick and hasn't been able to keep food down. And they've been vomiting or having diarrhea for a few days. Every time they're vomiting and they can't keep food down, they're not eating, every time they vomit or they have diarrhea, where's that stuff coming from? It's coming out of their bloodstream. They're losing fluids, they're losing nutrients, they're losing what's called electrolytes. And every mother has heard that when their infant is ill and they're vomiting, they have diarrhea, they can't eat, they call the pediatrician. The pediatrician says, give them Pedialyte, which is water and electrolytes to replace what they're losing and coming out either the mouth end or the anal end in the form of vomit or diarrhea. All right, so we'll get into all that. So now, this is the GI system. So basically it digests the food into nutrients, absorbs the nutrients into the bloodstream. This is the respiratory system. There it is. You say, that's it? What do you think these are? Those are the alveoli, the air sacs. That's the functional unit of the lungs. The whole function of the lung was to take oxygen that's out here and put it into the bloodstream across the alveoli, and at the same time take the carbon dioxide that's in the bloodstream and get it back out into the air. Here's the urinary system, right here, urinary system. What's this? What is that? This is the intestine. This is the urinary system. What are the functional units of the kidney? Nephrons, or renal tubules. That's a nephron, or renal tubule. It's not that your kidneys are filtering your blood, it's the nephrons within the kidney that filter the blood. It's not that your lungs provide oxygen, it's the alveoli of the lungs. Functionally, everything occurs at the microscopic level, functionally. So, the nephrons filter the blood, removing the waste products out of the bloodstream, the excess water, the excess salts, and they're excreted out of our body in the form of urine. Yep.
I have a question. Maybe it's not the same concept that you're talking about, but when a patient have a pulmonary hypertension, it's because it's the defect of the alveoli?
We'll get into, I don't want to get into pulmonary hypertension yet. Or we're going to talk about pulmonary hypertension, we're going to talk about renal hypertension.
Oh, okay.
We'll do all that stuff. Incidentally, when you hear these words, pulmonary hypertension, renal hypertension, it's kind of interesting. What does hypertension mean? High blood pressure. So what's this thing? High blood pressure, pulmonary high blood pressure, pulmonary hypertension, renal hypertension, renal high blood pressure. Because we said all the organs of your body are interconnected, like the parts of a car engine. And if any one of them doesn't work, it starts to affect all the others. A problem in the vasculature, in the cardiovascular system, can lead to respiratory problems. Problems in the kidney can lead to cardiovascular problems. It's all interconnected. And that's why you have these terms, pulmonary hypertension, renal hypertension, all these combining of systems. We're going to mention shortly a subject called neuroendocrinology. Nervous system and endocrine system, neuroendocrinology, because it's all interconnected. All right, so this is the way a physiologist tries to visualize how the body's working. All of these systems are trying to they are interrelating to the bloodstream, and they are trying to maintain the internal environment of the body constant. Let's go back to A3, another system that maintains the internal environment of the body constant and relates to the bloodstream is the immune system or lymphatic system. What is the lymphatic or immune system? It's like the most widely misunderstood system, right? But you learned about it in anatomy. And you learned about it even more if you had microbiology and covered immunology. The lymphatic system or immune system is made up of a number of lymphatic organs connected by lymphatic vessels. These lymphatic organs include the lymph nodes, the tonsils, the appendix, the spleen, the thymus. All of these are lymphatic organs. What are these lymphatic organs for? What are your tonsils for? What are your lymph nodes for? What is your spleen for? What's your appendix for? They produce immunologically active white blood cells. By that I mean lymphocytes. They produce lymphocytes. If you've had micro, you know that the subject of lymphocytes is very complex. There's T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes, and we subdivide the T lymphocytes or T cells into CD4 cells and CD8 cells, and it gets very complicated. Helper T cells. So there's all these immunologically active white blood cells. Some of them produce antibodies. These antibodies are produced by the B cells. And the whole purpose of these lymphocytes and macrophages and antibodies is to defend our body against bad guys. And that's why it's also called the immune system. It makes us immune to the bad guys so that we're not going to be destroyed by bacteria or viruses or fungi. So it defends our body against foreign agents. So does this maintain the internal environment of the body? Yes, it maintains my internal environment so I don't get destroyed by these foreign agents like bacteria and viruses. Does it relate to the bloodstream? Yes, because these blood cells, including lymphocytes, including antibodies, circulate in our bloodstream to protect us and defend us against bad guys. Now, before I go any further, Let me just lay it out on the line, what I'm really talking about. Because you might say, I'm listening to this lecture, but I don't know what he's really talking about here. When you go to, if you're not feeling well, and you go to the doctor, or you go to the hospital, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to draw blood from you. That blood that they're going to analyze reveals tremendous amounts of information about what's going on in your body. Let's see how. If they draw blood from you and they measure chemicals in the blood, first of all, if they measure the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in your blood, which they do, if the oxygen level in your blood is lower than normal, which system isn't working right? The respiratory. The job of the respiratory system was to ensure you had enough oxygen and you got rid of CO2. If the oxygen level in your blood is lower than normal, who's responsible? Your lungs, your respiratory system. There's a respiratory problem. What other problem would it be? The only organ that's going to cause a change in the oxygen levels is the lungs. If they measure the waste product levels in your blood, and the waste product levels in your blood are higher than normal, where's the problem? Urinary system. It's your kidneys that are supposed to get rid of those waste products. If the waste products are building up, you got kidney failure. You got a problem with your kidneys. If they measure the sugar levels in your blood, the amino acid levels in your blood, the cholesterol levels in your blood, it's the digestive system. That's the system that's involved in digesting and absorbing the sugars and the fats and the cholesterol and everything else. So by analyzing the chemical levels in your blood, it starts to point for the clinician which organ systems are failing. Where's there a problem? All that you know is you didn't feel well. The doctor's job is to figure out what's wrong with you. You say, doctor, I don't feel so good. Doctor says, you don't look so good either. Now we're going to draw blood and we're going to start to figure out what's wrong. When they take that blood sample, can they measure the white blood cell count? Can they measure the antibody levels? So if they see elevated, increased numbers of white blood cells, increased amounts of antibodies, you're fighting a bad guy. You've got an infection. Bacterial, viral, your body is fighting a bad guy, because the only time you produce more extra white blood cells and antibodies is if your immune system is trying to defend you. Of course, sometimes we might even see low levels of white blood cells and antibodies. That happens in HIV. In AIDS, the virus destroys the white blood cells, the lymphocytes, the T4 cells, and the person's losing their immune response. AIDS stands for acquired immune deficiency. But the point that I'm trying to make is why blood is one of the first things they want from you. Is they're going to analyze that blood in all these different ways. They're going to measure oxygen levels, CO2 levels, glucose levels, triglyceride levels, cholesterol levels, urea and uric acid waste product levels, antibody levels, white blood cell count, red blood cell count, and that's going to start to point in the direction of what's wrong with you. So it's used diagnostically. But it's really only helping us with those systems that relate to the bloodstream. Not all the systems relate to the bloodstream. Now, another system that maintains the internal environment of our body that relates to the bloodstream is the integument, which is the word the anatomists give for skin. Now, really, the most important role of skin, I did not write here. I did not list. The most important function of your skin is it acts as a mechanical barrier preventing the entry of foreign agents into your body. That's what the most important role of your skin is it creates a barrier, a mechanical barrier, preventing bacteria and viruses from getting into you. That's why when you cut yourself, when you have a wound, now you've got an opening into your body where the bad guys can enter, and you get an infection. But what I did mention is that your skin has another role. Most of these systems have multiple roles. Your skin plays a very important role in heat balance, in temperature regulation or heat balance. You'd say, yeah, in what way? In our skin are sweat glands. So when you become overheated, you start to sweat. What does that do? Sweating cools you down. We're going to be learning evaporation of sweat cools you down. So whenever you're overheated, you were in the hot sun, you were exercising and generating a lot of heat by muscular activity, you'll start to sweat to help cool you off. Does that maintain the internal environment of your body? Yes, prevents you from overheating. How does it relate to the bloodstream? When you sweat, right, you're sweating out of your skin, it's coming from your sweat glands. Where did the sweat glands get that fluid from? From your bloodstream. So when you're sweating a lot, all right, when you're sweating a lot, your blood volume is dropping. And if you don't replace that fluid, your blood volume continues to drop. And as your blood volume drops, what do you think happens to your blood pressure? It drops. So if you're, let's say, start to exercise in the hot sun, and you're really sweating, and you're sweating because you're hot, and your blood volume is dropping, and your blood pressure is dropping, you'll faint. You faint when your blood pressure drops. That's why you faint. Because that sweat, all that fluid you sweated out of your body, dropped your blood volume, which in turn dropped your blood pressure, causing you to faint. That's why. That's what physiology is about, to explain all these things. Certainly relates to the bloodstream. Now your skin plays another role in heat balance or temperature regulation. In every part of our body, including our skin, are blood vessels. The blood vessels in our skin are known as cutaneous blood vessels. Cutaneous means skin. All blood vessels in our body are capable of constricting or dilating, including those in our skin. When a vessel dilates, that increases the flow of blood through that vessel. If the vessel constricts, that reduces the flow of blood. Our blood vessels in our skin will constrict or dilate to control heat loss. Whenever we're overheated, the blood vessels in our skin dilate, increasing the flow of warm red blood near our skin to get rid of heat. To get rid of heat. An example you can demonstrate, all of you, to yourselves, is immerse your hands in really hot water. You'll notice the palms of your hands will turn all red. Is that right? That heat is causing the vessels to dilate, and your palms get all red because of all this increased flow of warm red blood to get rid of heat. Conversely, oppositely, if you immerse your hands in icy cold water, it'll look like all the blood went out of your hands. The vessels constrict to reduce heat loss from that icy cold water. So the blood vessels in our skin will dilate and increase blood flow to get rid of heat, or constrict, reducing the flow of blood to reduce heat loss. Is that also helping to maintain the internal environment of our body temperature? Yes. Is it relating to the bloodstream? Yes. All of these systems, in the way that I've described, all maintain the internal environment. They ensure adequate oxygen, not too much CO2, defends our body against bad guys, maintains our body temperature, ensures the nutrients, the sugars and amino acids we need, removes the waste products, and all relate to the bloodstream. Now on the next page, A4, there are two systems that I'm grouping now. This is a second grouping, a different grouping. There are two systems in our body that permit external voluntary movement. The two systems in our body that permit external voluntary movement, right, movement externally out here, are our skeletal system and our muscles. Now, you learned in anatomy, right, you learned all about the bones, and we have muscles that are attached to our bones. They're called skeletal muscles, because they're attached to our skeleton. When these muscles, like our biceps brachii, contract, the muscle shortens and it pulls or moves our bones. All right? That's how we move. We move our arms, we move our legs by controlling, activating these muscles that pull on our bones and make our bones move. Certainly, if you broke the bone, it would be very painful and maybe even impossible to move your arm if the bone is broken. But even if the bone is not broken, if there's injury to the muscle, it will hurt and possibly be impossible to move your arm. It requires both the bone and the muscle to move your body. So it requires both the skeletal system and the muscles to move those bones, the muscular system. And that's why we join them together. We call them the skeletal muscular system. Together, they'll permit voluntary movement. In fact, if somebody injures either a bone or a muscle, we call that a skeletal muscular injury. Incidentally, if somebody did have a skeletal muscular injury, where they've broken a bone, they've injured a muscle, and it hurts to move an arm or a leg or an ankle, which kind of doctor would they go to? An orthopedist. Orthopedists deal with skeletal muscular injuries. I only mention an orthopedist because a lot of people, including people right now in this class, don't know what an orthopod or an orthopedist is. One of the challenges that a layperson has is when they're sick, they don't even know which kind of doctor to see. If you had a problem in your digestive system, which kind of doctor specializes in digestive problems, GI problems? Gastroenterologist. If somebody has a problem in their cardiovascular system, a cardiologist. If they have a problem in their urinary or kidneys, a urologist or nephrologist. If it's a skeletal muscular injury, it's an orthopedist. So there's all these different subspecialties of medicine because the body is very complicated. And so we've got to have people who specialize in the different parts of the body, how they work. But we need to understand what these different parts are for. All right, so that's the skeletal muscular system. Now, a third grouping, the reproductive system. It's by itself. It's unique. How is the reproductive system unique? It's the only system of our body that does not function your entire life. Does a 7-year-old child have a functioning reproductive system? No, I don't think they can reproduce. So it doesn't work as a child. And in the case of women, does a 75-year-old woman have a functioning reproductive system? No. It's the only system that doesn't work your whole life. If your heart stops working, you're dead. If your kidneys stop working, you're dead. If your immune system doesn't work, you're going to die. This system doesn't work our whole life. Because this system is not required to keep us alive. It's necessary to create new life. All the other systems are keeping you alive. So it's unique. So we're trying to show you how physiology is really kind of analyzing what's going on in our bodies. We're not just talking about what organs are called and what they look like. We're trying to really understand the essence of what they're for. Now the last grouping, the fourth grouping, are those systems of the body that control everything else. There are two control systems, the nervous system and the endocrine system. The nervous system controls the other parts of your body. It controls your heart, it controls your muscles, it controls your digestive system, it controls your kidneys, it controls all the parts of your body by means of electrical signals called action potentials. The endocrine system is made up of all these glands that secrete hormones into the bloodstream. These chemicals, called hormones, also affect the activity of our body. These hormones that circulate in our bloodstream also control our kidneys, they control our reproductive system, they control our nervous system, they control our heart, but these are in the form of chemicals. Sometimes it's been comparing the nervous system with the endocrine system. To compare them, they'll say it's a little bit like comparing sending an email message versus sending snail mail. Now, you know what emails are, right? You write a letter, right? Hit send, boom, that person's got it. What's snail mail? Snail mail is the name they give for traditional sending a letter, right? You put the letter in a mailbox. The mail carrier is walking with the letter, right? They go to the post office. Somebody sorts it. It's carried by a truck. Somebody else takes the letter. They're going to carry it to somebody. Eventually, somebody's going to get that message. It's going to take a number of days, a week, 2 weeks. And somebody will eventually get that message. That's the way the endocrine system works versus the nervous system. Nervous system, boom, electrical impulse. Endocrine system will produce a hormone, will secrete the hormone will be carried through the bloodstream, and then it'll affect something. So it takes longer. But it's still a way of controlling other parts of the body. Now, we're going to be learning that, in fact, these two systems are interconnected. Where they're interconnected is where the pituitary gland is joined to your brain. The master endocrine gland of the body is the pituitary gland, located in the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. Remember that from anatomy. All right? The pituitary gland, which secretes all these hormones, many of them affect other endocrine glands, that we'll be learning about, is attached to the hypothalamus of your brain. So in fact, we're going to be learning that your brain controls your pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland secretes hormones that affect most other glands of the body. So in fact, your brain ultimately controls everything. And this subject of how your brain controls the endocrine system is called neuroendocrinology. Anytime you combine what appears to be two different systems together, it's showing you interaction between the systems. So what we've just done is to review the different systems of the body. And you already learned about them in anatomy. The unique thing was how I group them. Now, we want to start to move on to biological chemistry. What is the human body made of? If we analyze the human body chemically, we are about 60% water. And I want you to know that. We're about 60% water. Now, interestingly, infants and children are a higher proportion of water. And as we grow older, we become more and more dried out. And the proportion of water becomes less. Now, all the other chemicals that make up our body, you do not need to know the exact percent. You should know the order. The second major type of chemical that makes up our body are proteins. There are tens of thousands of different types of proteins in our body. And a large part of this class is going to be learning about what these proteins do. I mean, if we've got all these different proteins, what are they doing? What are they for? So they're proteins. The third major thing, the third thing in line are fats, lipids. Now, a question you might have is, well, wait a second. Really, would lipids, fats be third? What if you're really, really skinny? It'd still be third. You'd say, well, how could it be third if you're really, really skinny? What are cell membranes mostly made of? They're made up of phospholipids. So a cell membrane of all 60 trillion cells in your body is a fatty membrane. So even if you don't have a lot of body fat, other than that, the membranes of all the cells are mostly fat. The fourth thing in line are minerals. Minerals include things like calcium ions, sodium ions, potassium ions, phosphate ions. So these are electrically charged minerals. All right, obviously we've got a lot of calcium in our bones, as well as phosphate. We've got a lot of sodium and potassium. These are known as minerals, or electrolytes. We'll have more to say about them. After minerals come nucleic acids, like DNA and RNA. Because after all, in the nucleus of every cell in our body is the DNA and RNA chemicals. Here's what's really surprising. What we have very little of are carbs. carbs. There's almost no carbs in our body. Now, you might say, well, wait a second. You know, carbs are sugars. You'd say, what if I go and eat a whole bunch of sugar? Aren't I now going to have a lot of sugars or carbs in my body? No. You'd say, well, why not? If you eat a lot of sugar, it's turned into fat. You ever heard that if you eat a lot of candy, you'll get fat? All right? So the sugars are not stored much in our body. Just a little bit are stored in parts of our body. If we really eat a lot of sugar, it's converted into fat. All right, now, so there are 4 major categories of organic or hydrocarbon compounds. Carbs, which are sugars, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. On the next page, we remind you that all of these organic compounds, carbs, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, are really chains of carbon atoms with a lot of hydrogens attached. We'll remind you, and you would have learned this in biology, you'd learn it in chemistry, hopefully you've had both classes. You would have also reviewed it in micro. Every carbon atom forms 4 covalent chemical bonds. You'll remember that every carbon atom has 4 outer electrons that forms, and it shares those electrons with other carbon atoms, or hydrogen atoms, or oxygen atoms, or nitrogen atoms, forming these covalent bonds. The word covalent literally means to share electrons. Covalent, to share electrons. So now, when these covalent bonds are broken, in other words, if you have carbon atoms joined together by covalent bonds, if you break that bond, it releases energy. So if you break the covalent bonds that hold these carbs together, these lipids together, these proteins together, these nucleic acids together, they release a lot of energy. So all organic molecules will release energy when they're broken apart. That's really what cellular respiration is all about, which we'll be getting into. The splitting of these covalent bonds in organic molecules like carbs and fats to release energy to power the cells of your body. All right? Now, that's organic or hydrocarbon molecules. They're high in energy. Minerals. We just mentioned on the previous page, minerals are like calcium, phosphate, sodium. Minerals are also known as inorganic ions. Let me remind you, these terms you should have learned in biology and chemistry. Inorganic means they do not contain both carbon and hydrogen. Any molecule that contains both carbon and hydrogen is called a hydrocarbon or organic molecule. If it doesn't contain both carbon and hydrogen, it's said to be an inorganic chemical.
You'd say, like, I don't get that. What do you mean?
Okay. How about if I write, all right, so what's C6H12O6? Glucose. Is that organic or inorganic? Organic. It's a hydrocarbon.